Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So, Derek, you know what time of the month it is? It's time for the new MAME update. That is because MAME 2.8.5 released as of about 12 hours ago, bringing in some fundamentally new improvements and changes to some existing arcade boards. And even if January definitely isn't as busy of a month as December was for arcade emulation in MAME, we got a fun bit of improvements here and one new feature that absolutely is outstanding. So if you want to find out everything that's in MAME 2.8.5, we're going to have a good time. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. Now we know in previous months MAME update news, we've talked about the fact that Sega Model 2 emulation has gotten incredibly good on MAME, and you don't really have to use the standalone Model 2 emulator anymore for most games. So you're thinking to yourself, there must be some Model 2 emulation improvements here in January, and that isn't exactly the case, but I'm going to get into it in a moment. But the eagle-eyed among you may have already noticed the new update here to MAME. And even though I didn't capture it just because it's a little bit earlier than my interest point, Atari's Relief Pitcher is now running on the System 1 platform, and Moonraker, a shmup from the late 70s, is also working as well. But there is one fundamentally massive update this month and I absolutely love it. You now have the ability to use a plugin for light gun games, whether you're using a mouse, keyboard, or even a trackball. That way you can actually reload without having to point your gun off screen. If you go into plugins here, you're going to see all the way near to the bottom, there is going to be an off-screen reload helper plugin that is off by default and you want to turn it on. Just think of all those games you had a hard time actually reloading in, you couldn't really find the right part of the screen to point at if you were using something like an actual mouse and not a gun for IR where you could aim directly off the screen just by turning that plastic gun. Now you're going to be able to actually turn this plugin on and bind it to any sort of input on any controller, keyboard, mouse, or otherwise, so you can actually reload in the game without pointing off screen. And that absolutely is one of the best changes I've seen come to MAME as far as the main build in a very long time. Because honestly, some of the light gun games can be very tricky to actually get the reload in. There's only maybe like one corner or two corners where the actual aim will recognize that it isn't pointed at the screen and reload you. And having to drag your mouse, your cursor over there when there's actually stuff going on in front of you is a pain. Because in arcades, if you just swing that light gun quickly to the left or the right, you are reloaded. And basically the pro players out there will just cover the actual optical sensor in front of that plastic gun with their hand to register a missed shot and then keep shooting. It's something that I do all the time when I am playing arcade games, whether they are my personal PCBs or in arcades. But now that's not going to be a problem in MAME. Now I want you to be aware of one thing. Even though light gun games all play the same, there's two different types. There are types where you actually have a sensor, whether it's IR or whether it's the raster sensor, and there's other games where it's an XY potentiometer. Those games don't require you to reload off screen because there is no off screen. So you'll see here in the add reload helper, you can go ahead in the plugin menu in MAME and set that keyboard command or button command to whatever you want. That way when you're playing and you run out of bullets, all you need to do is press that key and then suddenly you will have a full clip again with no issues whatsoever. This is just fundamentally amazing. Even if it's a very small plugin that only does one thing, it is amply going to change the way that most users interact with MAME. Because when I do light gun videos, especially in MAME, I always get the same comment: I wish reloading was easier. Is there a way to make reloading easier? And what's the best controller to use? I don't really want to spend $400 on a custom light gun. So now you can use anything like a Wii cursor, you can use a trackball or mouse and be able to reload without trying to find that sweet spot on the screen. And trust me when I say that absolutely is just an amazing improvement. It makes the games flow a lot better, but do be aware sometimes it can also make them slightly easier. Now let's move over to another improvement here. You're going to see some crashing and freezing fixing on the Konami Hornet emulation, and that is when it's actually trying to analyze one of the chips on board the PCB, or in this instance in emulation. And that is going to be fundamentally amazing because if you know me and you know the channel, I absolutely love Konami 3D arcade hardware and have collected an example of every single board out there as far as the different hardware platforms are concerned. And even though I own an original Terrorburst arcade board, setting it up with the IR sensors and the actual controllers takes more time to do than actually playing the game from start to finish. And because this emulates so well in MAME now, it's one of those things, if I want to play Terrorburst, generally I'll just play in MAME versus taking out the monolithic slab of silicon and steel that is a Terrorburst board. But honestly, Hornet emulation could be a little bit dicey because randomly the game could just hang or just freeze on you, and that's one of those things. You don't want to sit down to play a 35-40 minute arcade game and then end up freezing it at minute 25 because you want to see the ending and you just can't. It's also going to be our first of 2 soundtrack samples because I love the music in Terror Burst and tell everyone to play this game. So listen, I'll be right back with a lot more news. Now, sound emulation in MAME 285 is not improved as far as Hornet is concerned, but I'm just letting you listen to that because I insist Terror Burst is absolutely a hidden gem that I want everyone to play. It's basically like the House of the Dead except with sci-fi horror, or something like Virtual Cop if all the bad guys were aliens from space. But remember, it isn't just stuff like Terror Burst on the Hornet. We have stuff like Silent Scope and a ton of other games that are absolutely incredible to play. And obviously the end goal of emulation is to blur the line between software emulation and real hardware in general. So you want a situation in which you're not really going to get any freezing whatsoever. That way you can just sit down and enjoy the game with no issues. Because trust me, don't get into collecting this stuff like I did. This is a Hornet PCB right here. It weighs something like 25 pounds with the entire metal cage on it. And if this fell and hit you in the foot, you're breaking every single bone in there, turning it legit probably to powder. I love collecting these things, but honestly, for 99.99 out of 100 of you out there, you're not going to want to touch this hardware. Go straight to MAME because Hornet emulation is going to be more stable this month. You'll also see some updates to Capcom CPS II, X-Men vs Street Fighter, as well as Marvel Superheroes vs Street Fighter have gotten some improvements where the background layer was drawing over some of the sprites. Now obviously that's something you don't want in emulation because sprite layer priority is super important. If the background layer even a little bit is drawing over what would be in the foreground, it breaks the illusion of what's actually going on and the game just doesn't perform as well. And even though we have stuff like Final Bird Neo for Capcom CPS II, and we have Mr. FPJ with the Capcom CPS II core from Hotego, having it in MAME again is an outstanding time, and getting improved performance on any sort of Capcom CPS II emulation is always going to be a win, because this was absolutely powerful hardware back in the day, and some of these games are still some of the best 2D versus fighting games you can ever play. And I totally get that there might be technically a better emulator to play CPS II in, but sometimes you just want to go ahead and play something like the House of the Dead, then you want to play Terror Burst, then you want to play a Capcom versus game without leaving the same emulator. So even though there's definitely a preferred emulator for basically every platform out there, I totally get that sometimes people just want to live in one environment for as long as they can. So you're getting graphical improvements to 2 of the best Capcom versus fighting games. Absolutely a 10 out of 10 win in my opinion. But leave me a comment down below and you tell me, when you emulate CPS II, what do you choose? I would be curious. And let's go into the second of 2 soundtrack samples. Again, no audio improvements, but I love the soundtrack and I can make you listen. I'll be right back.
Ready, fight!
Now on the much smaller improvement side, but still important, you're going to see here for Sega System 32, Alien 3 The Gun and Clones. The gun Y-axis wraps from the top and the bottom has been corrected, and honestly this is something that I never really encountered in my playthrough because this game has worked really well in MAME for the longest time, but it is kind of indicative to just how granular the devs get making sure everything works correctly, because if you end up with any controller issues in a game when you're playing it on MAME, you're just not going to have that much fun with it. And I figured it is a very light gun heavy episode here with multiple different Sega platforms being featured and multiple different light gun properties as well. So I'm just here to remind you, if you've never played Alien 3 The Gun, it is an outstanding 10 out of 10 arcade game with some incredible sprite scaling and one of the best horror movie franchises of all time, and you're missing out if you didn't check it out. Now moving over to the last fundamental change, you're going to see there's been some fixes on Atari Jaguar emulation. Cartridge EEPROM not being emulated has been basically bug fixed, so it is my really fun way to transition back to an Alien game, Alien vs Predator, because remember, MAME can also do consoles. Now of course Big PMU from Rich Whitehouse exists, so if you really wanted the quote-unquote best Atari Jaguar emulation out there, you'd go right to Rich Whitehouse's Big PMU. But again, it's great that there's multiple sources for this. We have a Mr. FPGA core, we have Big PMU, we have MAME, so these things are always getting fixed up, and it really just shows the dedication to the people who develop these things to make sure they absolutely can do their very best to keep the retro gaming love alive, and I absolutely love that. But if I had to pick one improvement this month to be the #1 winner, being able to actually have reload assist in MAME light gun games is straight up like magic. The one thing you need to avoid is just basically spamming that button, because you can make games almost free to win because you basically can give yourself unlimited ammo. But honestly, having this ability is going to allow a lot more people to play these light gun games without fighting with the aim and the off-screen reload, because I'm used to it. I totally have been doing it for a very long time, but if you're a newcomer to MAME, it just might not hit the same way. But you leave me a comment down below and you tell me what your favorite improvement of the month was. I would be curious. I totally get January's been a little bit of a quieter month for MAME versus December, November, and even October, but I'm sure it's going to heat up very soon. But short of that, we are done. Go download MAME.285. If you need a MAME tutorial or MAME guide, check my playlist, and I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.